Thanks for joining us here on Octagon Outlook. I'm your host, James Lynch. Today, we have a very special guest, a regular here on Octagon Outlook, UFC bantamweight Brian Kelleher, who's supposed to be fighting this weekend on the UFC Fight Island 7 card, but unfortunately, coronavirus looming its ugly head here. But Brian, thanks for doing this, man, and love the Islanders jersey. Of course, NHL regular season starting up here. We're big fans of hockey here at Line Movement, so we had to get a fellow hockey fan, fellow MMA expert here on here. Brian, how's it going?
Great, man. Hockey's coming back soon. Can't wait. Thanks for having me. It's good to keep busy over here.
Yeah, absolutely. And we might as well just start there with what's happened with you. Obviously, it was a false positive test for your coronavirus test, which has knocked your fight out with Ricky Simón. Now, Simón, I just saw this morning, has actually been moved to, I believe, the next card on the 20th. So he's not going to be fighting. But, just for those who don't know, what exactly happened? Take us through the series of events where you found out you wouldn't be fighting Ricky Simón.
Yeah, so prior to leaving to Vegas, they send us the tests out, to do our self-tests. And I did that with my dad. He was going to be coming out to Abu Dhabi with me. My two corners, my other two corners who I train with and I'm very close to proximity with, I tested positive somehow. Jeff Nowitzki called me like maybe 3 nights later. My dad was negative. My two corners, my training partners were all negative. I had my brother get a test. He was negative. I've been training and sparring with him, for weeks and weeks leading up to this. So it was really odd, and I didn't feel any symptoms or anything. I felt 100% healthy. So I was like, I feel like this is off, like something's wrong. So I went and got another test, the PCR test, which is the most accurate one you can get, 3 days after that. And I ended up being negative on that test. So it all kind of made sense then. I was like, I think it was a false positive, but unfortunately the way the UFC works is you need about 10 days of time spread when there is a positive test in order to rebook your fight. And that was, it was in the way of me flying out to Vegas, so I couldn't even leave to go to the fight. It was just too short time span.
Yeah, and I guess I'm sure you were hoping to get the Simón fight rescheduled. He has a new opponent. Looks like that's going to be in the January 20th card, like I was mentioning. I'm sure you're a little disappointed because I know that's a fight they've been trying to make happen for a while. It was Simón who actually tested positive last time, right?
Yeah, I think it was his cornerman or something in
Right. Yeah,
August.
sorry,
We were trying to
cornerman.
get the
Yeah.
fight going. Yeah, and it fell through due to a cornerman's testing positive, and then now we tried to reschedule it for now, January 16th, and now my test came positive. So I don't know. It's one of those fights that we're trying to make happen, but things keep coming up in the way. But I think, if he gets the job done and maybe he doesn't get hurt or any injuries, we can kind of rebook it as soon as possible. I'd like to fight in February, though.
Gotcha. And I'm imagining, are they still going to be in Fight Island in February, or do you think that's back to Vegas? What's the latest of what you're hearing?
Yeah, what I'm seeing is they come back to Vegas for the 6th, the 13th, and then the card after that. I believe they kind of proposed those 3 for Vegas so far, but you never know what happens. But I think as of now, it's going back to Vegas.
Well, let's hope so. A little less travel time, which is always nice. Although Abu Dhabi is very beautiful, but then you don't have all the other travel times and everything like that. All right. Normally, this is a recap show, but today, obviously, there's nothing to recap. So we'll be doing a quick preview here of the UFC Fight Island 7 card. We're only going to talk about a couple fights. This was on the main card at the time I wrote my notes down, but it's not anymore. It's on the prelims, which I don't get. One of the best fights on the card. And we'll start there first. It is Omari Akhmedov taking on Tom Breeze. And just going to check here on BlitzBet. We do have odds for that fight. Right now, they have Omari Akhmedov as the underdog at plus 125, Tom Breeze minus 154. I'm a little bit surprised, Boom, just because of the fact that Akhmedov has fought really good competition in that division. He's coming off the loss to Chris Weidman. Yes, it was a fight I think he probably had the ability to win. He just didn't get it done with the wrestling. But you look at that before that win over Ian Heinisch. Tom Breeze is great. Don't get me wrong, good record, but he just beat a guy who was making his UFC debut on short notice in KB Buller, who hadn't fought in over a year. I think the line's off here. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the experience definitely goes to Akhmedov. He's had tougher competition, especially as of late. And with Breeze, he's always had that issue before fights with anxiety and kind of the lead up to the fights. And we don't really know where he's at with that. I think he kind of solved that. But as far as, styles go, Akhmedov has that grinding style where he's able to wrestle you and kind of, outpoint you with takedowns and stuff. I don't think it was a good gauge with Weidman. I don't think that was the same Weidman in that fight, that last fight we saw. So I wouldn't really look at that fight as a good gauge. But Akhmedov didn't look amazing in that fight either. He started to kind of fade in the later rounds. So with that said, I believe Breeze is the younger guy. I'd probably lean towards Breeze in this fight, but Akhmedov's been a little bit more active, so it's up in the air.
Yeah, we'll see. And then you should mention the fight before KB Bowler. Brendan Allen pretty much just steamrolled through Tom Breeze. So you do wonder where he's at the middleweight division. Obviously, good record, fought primarily at welterweight, but, since he's moved up, it's kind of a mixed bag. I think it's a little bit too risky. I think there's absolutely value on Akhmedov, especially with some of the wins he's had. Like I mentioned, Ian Heinisch, and just, he's looked much better since moving up to middleweight himself. So, yeah, I'm going Akhmedov with the upset here. I think he can pull off a decision, especially if he survives that first round. We know Breeze is very dangerous early on. We saw that in the last fight with KB Bowler, but I think going from KB Bowler, who, don't get me wrong, fellow Canadian, love the guy, but going from him to Omari Akhmedov is a huge jump up. I don't know if Tom Breeze passes that test, but we will see. I'm going with the underdog in this one. Let's get to the other fight in the middleweight division on this card. This is on the main card. Joaquin Buckley, the highlight reel machine, is going to be taking on Alessio Di Chirico. Right now on BlitzBet, we do not have odds for that fight yet, but if you look basically across the board, Buckley is the favorite, pretty decent favorite actually. Where are you leaning on this one? Because Di Chirico really needs a win here, 3 straight losses. Buckley, since getting knocked out by Kevin Holland, 2 back-to-back highlight reel finishes. Which way are you leaning on this one, Boom?
Yeah, I mean, Buckley's hot right now. I think the UFC likes to jump on guys like that, hype trains, guys that are doing big things, younger guys coming up. And I think this is one of those fights where it's just a little step up in competition for Buckley, but it's also very winnable for him. Di Chirico is a pretty good striker. He has decent power, but I think Buckley's just more flashy, able to put different things together, and definitely more well-rounded. Chirico's going to be his toughest test, I think, to date, but I think Buckley's going to get it done. I think it will probably see another knockout here eventually, probably a little bit later, second or third round, but I'm going to go with Buckley.
Well, what's interesting about this fight is that G Chirico has never been knocked out in his career. So it'll be interesting to see if he can take a punch from Buckley. If you look at some of his past opponents, G Chirico, that is, not a lot of guys in there with the type of knockout power like Joaquin Buckley. So it gets very interesting. I've always said this with Buckley. He's pretty undersized for the division. I think he stands at about 5'11", which, right now it's not an issue. It wasn't an issue against Jordan Wright or Impa Kasanane. But, as you start to fight those guys that are like the Paulo Costas, for example, you will see that size discrepancy. And I think it will catch up to him. I do wonder if he could make welterweight because he has fought there in the past. But yeah, I like Buckley in this fight. I'll get your thoughts on this. I kind of feel like the UFC's in a way kind of giving Buckley another fight where he can shine and potentially get a highlight reel finish in this one, because I am surprised he's not fighting someone ranked. I know a lot of fighters are booked up, but I do wonder why he's getting this fight when he's coming off 2 back-to-back highlight reel wins. Like, you look at like Chaos Williams or Khamzat Chimaev. I mean, they're usually getting guys after 2 straight stoppages, guys that are a little bit more known. G Chirico, I'll be honest, I was surprised to see him get another fight after losing 3 in a row. So I think this is kind of Buckley's fight to lose. I do wonder though, Boom, the later this fight goes, does that favor Di Chirico? He's got a lot of decisions on his resume, whereas Buckley's more of a finisher. We'll see, but I'm with you. I'm going to take Buckley inside the distance. Well, not inside the distance. It's knockout or bust, I think, for Buckley. I think he might win a decision, but highly unlikely he gets a submission here. But I think Buckley's going to get it done and take care of business. What do you think from that perspective? If the fight goes longer, do you think that does favor Di Chirico just because he has more experience there?
Yeah, that's a good point. He definitely has more experience. He's the older veteran, so he's been in there with more guys, and he's been in there for longer. So it could, he hasn't fought in a little bit, so maybe that's not so much of a factor with the momentum that Buckley has right now. But it could definitely play a role. We haven't really seen, we seen Buckley go to the later rounds, right? In his last fight, did he go the distance?
No,
the
he
last
knocked
one?
out Jordan Wright in the second round.
Second round, yeah. So we haven't seen that third round. We want to see, what he looks like if he's getting tested and the third round comes. So it could be a factor for sure with Di Chirico. He's definitely got slick striking, and he's been the decision a lot of times, like you said. So definitely look out for that.
Before we move on to our next fight, I just want to remind anyone watching live, or even if you're watching the replay, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. We do the show every Monday, Octagon Outlook, rotating guest co-hosts, always recapping all the cards and talking about all the major news. And also, I mean, like, we're wearing our hockey jersey, started the NHL season coming up here. A lot of hockey content, Real Kipper at noon. Lots of good content here on this channel. So not just if you're an MMA fan, there's all sports, football, Tilt Space, one of my favorite shows on this channel as well. And my best interviews you'll see on this channel as well. Just talked to Michael Chiasso. We posted that interview just before the show came aboard. Of course, Chiasso going to be headlining UFC Fight Island 8 on the 20th. So keep an eye out for that. Really great fight here in the welterweight division. Santiago Ponzinibbio finally back in action first time since November of 2018. He's going to be taking on Jingling Li. And if you look at the odds right now, we do not have the odds up yet. But again, Ponzinibbio is a pretty decent favorite from what I've been seeing. Rightfully so. This guy had a really big win in his last fight over Neil Magny. It was actually the last time Magny lost a fight. So he's heading in this really long layoff, taking on a guy in Jingling Li who's very tough to finish, is always in every fight. Which way are you leaning on this one, Boom?
Yeah, Ponzinibbio is way more experienced with fighting higher competition. I mean, he has been out for a while, but he's beat really good guys, and he's coming on, in on a win streak here. I think this is, potential fight of the night. Two guys that are going to bang in there and throw heavy hands. Both very exciting fighters. I really don't see the fight going to the ground much. I think it's just going to be back and forth on the feet, which makes for, happy fans. So yeah, I'm looking at Ponzinibbio though, just based off experience and who he's beat. I think he's just a higher level guy in there. I think he's going to be able to catch Lee. What's his name? Sorry,
Jingling Li. Yeah, I'm probably butchering it too.
Jingling Li. There we go. Yeah, I think he'll take out Jingling Li probably later on. They're both very, able to take shots, I feel. So later on, I got Ponzinibbio by knockout.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because Lee, I'm looking on his resume here, no knockout losses. Granted, I don't think he's fought anyone with the power that Ponzinibbio possesses here. He's just, the last stoppage loss he had was a submission loss to Nakamura way back in 2015. So pretty durable, but by far the toughest opponent he's fought to date. And if we're going by MMA math here, I do have to point it out. I mean, it doesn't always work this way, but obviously Neil Magny beat Jingling Li last year by decision. Ponzinibbio finished him. So that's another feather in the cap. We'll see. With it only being 3 rounds, I tend to think this fight might go the distance just in case, because Ponzinibbio wanting to get a little bit more comfortable in there. But he should be the rightful favorite in here. If Ponzinibbio looks anything like what we saw in the last fight against Neil Magny, I think he wins this fight. I think it's his fight to lose. But you never know with layoffs, right? Boom. Either you got a Brian Ortega situation where you look amazing and you surprise everyone, or you've got, another situation where, let's say, you're coming in and showing a bit of cage rust here. But I think Ponzinibbio wins this fight. I think more likely it goes to the decision than a stoppage, just because Lee is pretty durable and pretty tough to put away. But that's where I'm going on this one. So Boom says finish. I say decision. But yeah, just keep an eye out for that fight. Great fight on the main card in the welterweight division. Let's get to the co-main event. What is this, 2013? We've got Carlos Condit taking on Matt Brown. The reason I bring up that year is because that's the last time they were supposed to fight. Of course, Matt Brown had a back injury, ended up having to pull out, and they've gone their separate ways since up until now. But I love this fight, Boom. Two savvy veterans, two guys that have been in the UFC for a very long time. And we don't have odds in this one, but a lot of the lines I'm seeing, you're seeing Condit being a slight favorite here. But this is such a wild card to me, right? Because Condit did win his last fight. He got the win over Court McGee. But before that, I think 3 straight losses. Matt Brown, same thing, very inconsistent, has a couple knockout wins. Coming off the loss to Miguel Beza, who's, amazing. I mean, he's one of the futures fighters in the welterweight division right here. But where are you leaning on this one? Because it's an interesting fight.
Yeah, I mean, Matt Brown's been out for a while, right? But this is like a toss-up fight for me. It can go either way. It's so close. Two veterans that are kind of in the same position. The only thing is that Condit, fought recently, and he looked decent. It fought a tough veteran in Court McGee, a grinder. Not an easy guy to beat. So I give Condit the edge just based off of that, just having that activity of recent. And but I do see Matt Brown as being a little bit more of an aggressive finisher. I think maybe he could land an elbow or something like that, and he goes in there to kill. Condit's a little bit smarter. His movement's a little better. He utilizes range really well. But I'm going to lean towards Condit. I think the fight will go the distance. I think he could take damage too, so I don't think he'll get finished. But I go Condit by decision.
Well, it's interesting because Matt Brown, not really known as a submission specialist, and the reason I bring that up is because the last 3 stoppage losses for Carlos Condit have been by submission, right? He was submitted by Maia, Oliveira, and Michael Chiesa. So Matt Brown's not going to take this to the ground and try and submit Carlos Condit. If he did, I'd be very surprised. So it's probably going to stay standing. And Brown is a finisher. I mean, we saw him finish Diego Sanchez. We saw him finish Ben Saunders. But here's the thing, Boom, Condit, tough to finish, right? You look at his career, his last technical TKO loss was actually a knee injury against Woodley. But outside of that, he's never been finished. And I know at some point the chin's got to go. He's been in a lot of wars. But if Matt Brown can't finish Carlos Condit, Condit might be able to, survive the onslaught and maybe pick up a decision like he has. So that's what makes the matchup interesting. It's the same reason why I picked Condit over Court McGee in his last fight, because McGee's not going to knock out or not going to submit Carlos Condit. He's not going to knock him out. So I just felt like there was an advantage there. So I think it's possible Condit's turned a bit of a corner, not the type of corner that's going to make him go, on a run for the welterweight title, but I think Condit might edge out a decision here, but we'll see. I mean, if Matt Brown goes out there and knocks out Condit and surprises us all, because Matt Brown still does have power at 40 years old, I wouldn't be shocked by that. But just off the style matchup, I kind of feel like Condit's going to edge this one out by decision, but I don't think Condit's going to finish Brown. I think it will be a fight that does go the distance or Brown finishes, but that's kind of where I'm leaning on this one. How about this though? The implications, Boom. I mean, these are two guys that are getting up there in age. Condit's 36, Brown is 40. I tend to think the loser might want to consider calling it quits. What do you think? Do you think we'll get there, or do you think both guys will try and stick around a little bit longer?
I think it depends on the performance, you know. I think Condit, based off his last fight, got a good win, didn't take crazy amount of damage. I think that's definitely a factor. Like, how bad are you getting beat? Are you getting brutally knocked out? Are you not performing at all and you just don't have it mentally? Those kind of things definitely come into play when it comes to retirement. You know, I think Matt Brown definitely still has that killer instinct in him, but it really comes down to how somebody loses. You know, if you lose embarrassingly or you just don't show up at all and you don't perform to your potential and you recognize that, that could be a telltale for, you know, the end coming soon. So
yeah, a lot on the line here for both guys, but great co-main event. I actually, you know, it's a fight night. It's not a pay-per-view, so I don't mind fights like this. You know, these are two well-known names in the MMA industry, in the MMA game, so to speak, and I'm happy to see this as a co-main event, especially when you got Holloway and Kattar as the main event. What a good 1-2 punch there. No pun intended between Condit and Brown, and then going to Holloway and Kattar on ABC, by the way, which is a huge deal, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But let's get to the main event. This, to me, on paper, one of the best fights of the year. I know we still got a lot of fights left in 2021, but it's going to be pretty hard to top this one. Max Holloway taking on Calvin Kattar. It's just nice to see Max Holloway not fighting Volkanovski again, kind of switching things up a little bit, but really interesting fight. If you go on blitzbet.eu right now, for our Canadian listeners, you can bet there. Calvin Kattar right now, the underdog at plus 130, Max Holloway minus 161. That's pretty much where I would set this line too. I don't think Holloway needs to be a 2-1 favorite, but I do see it a little bit closer. Where are you going on this one, Boom? Because it's a really interesting fight.
yeah, this fight's amazing, man. Two very high level strikers, and you know, Kattar, the young guy coming up, trying to take Holloway's spot. You know, this is the first fight in a while Holloway's been in that's not a title fight, right? And he has that experience. You know, he's been in many round fights. You know, he's been under the lights where, you know, the stakes are really high, and this is kind of Kattar's first chance at that. So I think that could be a factor. I do think Max Holloway's a little bit more versatile on the feet. He's shown improvements with his kicks in that last fight against Volkanovski. I thought he won that fight, to be honest. I thought he edged it out. And with that said, you know, we know Max Holloway is not fading away. He's not losing a step. You know, he didn't lose a clear-cut, you know, decision or get finished by Volkanovski where we think maybe he's starting to dwindle a little bit. I think he's still the same Max Holloway. I think he's going to have a chip on his shoulder to say, hey, you know, this young guy coming up is not going to take my spot just yet. Like, I'm still here to get a title again. So I lean towards Max Holloway. You know, I just don't think it's going to be easy to finish this fight. Kattar's got some of the best striking in the game. His 1-2 is really fast and precise, and you know, he could take a shot too. So I don't see a finish. I see a long fight, a 5-round fight, and I think Max Holloway will edge him out 3-2.
That's pretty much how I see this fight as well. And by the way, you called Kattar kid, and I made this mistake this morning as well. Kattar's actually older than Holloway, believe it or not. He's 32 years old. Holloway's only 29. It just goes to show how long Max Holloway's been fighting. So that's pretty interesting. But look at this, man. I mean, we got to point this out. You mentioned how, you know, this is the first non-title fight for Holloway in forever, because people forget that Poirier fight was for an interim title. You have to go all the way back to June of 2016, where Holloway did not fight for a title. It was just a regular fight. And that was how many fights ago? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That was like 9 fights ago. Like, it's crazy. This guy's always been, you know, in tough opposition, tough competition, so to speak. So I'm with you there. I think Kattar's made some great improvements since his last loss against Zabit. You know, finishing Jeremy Stephens, no easy task. Even Zabit couldn't finish Jeremy Stephens in their fight. So that was a good one. And I like the Dan Ige fight as well. You know, Ige's a very durable guy, Hawaiian as well. And, you know, he was ready to fight till that final bell, and Kattar was able to take over as the fight went on. So I think this is the right fight for Kattar at this point. I see this being a pretty close fight, and I'm with you. I think it hits the judges' scorecards. Kattar's never been finished. Max Holloway's never been finished. I just can't see Kattar going out there and finishing a Max Holloway when you look at the guys that, you know, Holloway's fought, including Volkanovski, Edgar, Poirier. I mean, you look at Poirier, how many shots he threw at Holloway and wasn't able to put him away. I don't think we'll see a finish there. Personally, if you guys are looking for a bet in this one, I think the fight goes the distance prop is probably your best bet, just in case there could be some, you know, judging that might not go the way of whoever you're thinking here. But I do have to give the edge to Max Holloway, just simply based off, you know, two things. Number one, level of competition. I mean, I think Holloway's fought way better fighters over the last 9 fights than Kattar has. And two, I just think Holloway has, he really needs to win this. If he loses this fight, it'll be 3 in a row. The chances of him fighting for a title again at 145 is probably pretty slim. I don't think you'd be surprised if Holloway loses this, depending on how he loses. I mean, if it was a close fight, maybe not. But if he loses decisively, don't be surprised if Holloway maybe looks at going to 155 and making that his home. It's a tough cut for him to get to that weight class. We'll be keeping tabs on that. But I think there's a lot of implications here. And the pressure for sure is on Holloway here, because even if Kattar loses, he fights a couple more times, he could get right back in the spot, just like he was when he fought, when he lost to Moicano and got the spot against Zabit, or, conversely, when he lost to Zabit, now here he is fighting Max Holloway, the former champ. So I expect this to be pretty close, but I do see this going the distance, even though it is a 5-round fight. I think it's going to be very close, very, very interesting fight. And we'll see, has Calvin made enough improvements in his striking to beat a Max Holloway? We will find that out. So yeah, I'm torn on this one, but I got to pick Max Holloway by decision. Boom and I agree on that one. All right, so that's our little recap, or little preview, I should say, of the UFC Fight Island 7 card. I wanted to go on a little rant here. I mentioned the Joaquin Buckley fight, Boom, and I'll get your thoughts on this in a second here, but the UFC missed the boat on this fight. They had an easy fight lined up for Joaquin Buckley, and that was James Krause. Now, if those who haven't seen it, I mean, it's been all over the internet. James Krause, not a fan of Joaquin Buckley. I'll give you the Coles Notes version. Basically, Krause said that Buckley, wanted to train at his gym, and that Krause, Buckley sort of gained this reputation in Missouri for being sort of this guy to call out fighters that are lower than him in weight class. Apparently, according to Krause, he called out, Trey Ogden and some of these other lighter fighters that fight at 155 when Buckley's now fighting at middleweight. So Krause didn't like that. And there's also been, according to Krause, Buckley being a bit of a bully in the gym. We've heard this with other fighters where maybe they're going a little too hard to sparring. Nonetheless, there's two sides to every story. So just, I'm just mentioning what Krause said, but you could see that these guys don't like each other. When Krause is asked about it, he goes off. Our mutual buddy, Mike Heck, did a great interview with Krause last week, sort of explaining the situation. This idea that Krause was scared to fight Buckley is just totally inaccurate. He even had teammates of his, Zach Cummins and Julian Marquez, offering to step up and fight Buckley as well. So I don't know why the fight's not happening. I don't think it's on Buckley's end either. He went on the microphone, if you remember, after that win over Jordan Wright, saying, I want this fight next. He wouldn't even mention his name. That's how pissed off he was. So Buckley clearly wanted the fight. I have the feeling the UFC wanted to keep this fight away when you look at the experience with Krause, of the potential upset there, right? If Krause had fought him, it beat Buckley, it kind of kills the hype train here. But I also feel like you got to strike while the iron's hot, right? Like Buckley got knocked out 2 fights ago. I think people forget that. I think, MMA fans have a very short memory. If you had lost this fight, I think you could still build him back up again. But to me, this is just such a missed opportunity by the UFC, because you have 2 guys who hate each other. There's a lot on the line here, in terms of both guys and their careers. And, like I said, Krause wanted the fight. Even if he didn't want the fight, his teammates wanted the fight. Storylines are tough to develop on their own in MMA, and I think the UFC missed the boat on this one, because we'd be talking about how good of a grudge match this is, and now we're talking about how Buckley's probably going to beat LSU Chirico, who's on a 3-fight losing streak. So I want to know your thoughts on that. Do you think the UFC missed the boat here, Boom?
Yeah, I agree. I think this is a great fight, for both of these guys. And like you said, storylines, that it kind of just naturally came about. It's real stuff, real dislike for each other. And, Krause is a guy that you can kind of put in there with anybody. He's not a guy that's really in the top 10, top 5, where he has to kind of make his way up to the title. Like, he's just there, and he's a veteran and he'll fight anybody. And I do think maybe it's a case of the UFC kind of protecting Buckley a little bit still, trying to get him some more wins, build him up. They don't want to get too risky with him. I think Krause is a difficult matchup. But yeah, I mean, it's not a fight that can't still happen. I think, Buckley gets this win against Chirico. You never know. It could be the next test for Buckley. So hopefully it still happens. Gonna have to keep this heat going, and I think it's definitely possible. But yeah, I think, the UFC is just looking to kind of build this hype train and keep it going for now.
Or at the very least, give him one of his teammates that you could potentially beat. I don't know. I just think that when you to have a rivalry like this, it reminds me of Woodley and Covington, right? Like, you had this fight made in terms of the buildup, and yes, they did end up fighting, but it was at a point where it just had lost all its momentum. I think, when you have these sort of, and Boom, you're a fellow pro wrestling fan growing up like I was. I mean, those are the type of things that get fans interested, those grudge mats, and they just don't happen too often. So I think there was a miss there on the UFC. But like I said, I know it's a business as well, and they want to keep, keep things moving, as they say. So I understand that as well. But yeah, I think they missed the boat there. The other big thing, like I sort of alluded to, is this card is going to be on ABC, which is a huge deal, Boom. Like, people talk about the UFC being on network television already, being on Fox, but, Fox is always considered sort of that third major network that's kind of a bit edgier, right? Like, they would air, like, some stuff like Cops was on there forever, right? Like, it's sort of known as sort of like a, not taboo, but just sort of an edgier network. But ABC, I mean, this is wholesome family content. I think this is a long time coming for the UFC to get on this platform. You know, they've made strides obviously with the ESPN deal, and ESPN's owned by Disney and Disney owns ABC. So I'm actually a little bit surprised it took this long to get to this point. I don't know if COVID kind of put a wrench in things, but I think this is a huge opportunity for the UFC to cater to more of a casual audience here. I mean, I think most people who have a basic cable package have ABC on their networks. And I'm curious that, you know, what type of audience is going to tune in here, because I think you're going to get an audience that's going to be different. And look, I guarantee you there's going to be some articles after this saying how barbaric the UFC is, because you're going to get those mom and pop people who normally wouldn't watch fighting, and it's going to be on their dial. So, you know, I think it's great for the UFC that they're getting this opportunity after such a long time of, you know, grinding away from Spike TV to Fox to ESPN to now to this, because yes, ESPN's a big deal, but it's a sports channel. It's not a mainstream channel like we're seeing right now with ABC. So I think this is a good move, and hopefully it leads to bigger opportunities for the fighters. Your reaction to the UFC being on ABC to kick off 2021?
I mean, I think it's amazing, you know, like you said, ESPN sports channel. So it's kind of already geared towards that target. And now ABC is going to draw in a different kind of fan potentially. And maybe, you know, that kind of has you know, an effect where you bring in a lot more different people that wouldn't typically watch, and they come across it now on, you know, regular cable, and they're interested, and it draws them in. And maybe, you know, they tell the stories of the fighters, and if they look into it, maybe they find, you know, love for the sport and love for the fighters. I think, you know, you got to kind of look deeper than just the barbaric aspect, and look at us as athletes like every other athlete. I know it's more dangerous and different, but I think it's great for the fighters and for the UFC. Going to bring in a lot more eyes, and I can't wait to be a part of it.
By the way, if there are any articles that come out and people are saying, you know, it's barbaric, just ignore them, because those people, no matter what, you're not going to change their mind. They're always going to think if fighting's barbaric. You're not going to, like, there's no need to negotiate with these people. They're always going to feel that way, even though, you know, they probably watch football and it's just as dangerous. So yeah, I think we're going to see probably a mixed bag, but at the very least, we're going to get a different audience for the UFC, which I think is nothing but good for the fighters and getting that extra exposure. So I think it is a win-win. Some big news in the UFC last week. It's not 100% official, but it looks like we're finally going to get Petr Yan against Aljamain Sterling. Of course, they were supposed to fight last year. I think it was some travel issues or something with Petr Yan, but we're finally going to get this fight. I hope that was the issue, is that it was travel stuff, and it wasn't that the UFC was trying to screw around with that title fight, but it was the obvious fight to make. Sterling with the big win over Corey Sandhagen, Petr Yan obviously winning the title from Jose Aldo in that vacant title spot with Cejudo leaving the division. But your thoughts on this matchup for UFC 259, which now has 3 title fights?
Yeah, I kind of got worried there for a little bit too. I was like, maybe the UFC is trying to pull something right now. Like, this is weird. You know, maybe there were some negotiations going on or something behind the scenes, but I never really figured out why Petr Yan took that time off. I know maybe I heard something about training, and now I see that he's at American Top Team getting some training in over there for the time being. But I'm excited. I think, you know, Aljo's well deserving of this fight. You know, this is a great high level bantamweight fight where the 2 top guys are going at it. And, you know, 2 different styles as well. You know, Petr Yan primarily a striker, Aljamain primarily a grappler, and we all want to see, like, where's this fight going to end up? How's this fight going to play out? So I'm looking forward to it. And, you know, I'm glad they made the right decision, to be honest, you know, and gave Aljo this fight.
The thing I like about Yan is that he's not going out there saying, I want to fight Volkanovski. I mean, he just won the title, right? Like, you know, you see a lot of these guys now, they're trying to, and I don't blame them. I mean, they want to make more money, but they're trying to, you know, get the double champ fight or whatever. And I'm glad to see Yan saying, look, Aljo is the #1 contender. I want to fight him. The reason I mentioned about the fight being delayed, maybe there's something else going on. I do wonder if Cody Garbrandt was an option there, because he's coming off a win. He's a former champ. He's got some clout, right? I was kind of worried. And, you know, they had a back and forth, right? If you remember, actually 245 last year, I think it was backstage where Yan and Garbrandt got into it. So I was a little worried about that, but glad to see Sterling get this. He's absolutely earned his opportunity here. And it's an interesting fight, because I think if you look on most betting lines right now, you know, even prior to when the fight was rescheduled, Yan was the favorite, but I think Sterling poses a very interesting matchup with his grappling, with his size, with his range. It's going to be a much different fighter than what Yan has faced in the past. So I'm really, really intrigued by that. And by the way, with it being 3 title fights, I know some people are like, oh, you know, you shouldn't stack the deck. I don't mind that, because right now I believe that same card is the actually I'll look it up right now, is the whole card with I believe that's Adesanya and Blachowicz. It is, yeah. So the 2 other title fights on there is Blachowicz, Adesanya, Nunes, Anderson, and now this fight as well, which I don't mind, because with COVID, stuff could happen. I mean, we've seen this time and time again where fights get called off, and I don't think Yan and Sterling and Anderson and Nunes are enough to headline a card on their own. I know people would like to think that way, but you got to look outside the bubble. You got to look outside of what's going to sell. So I think if you have 3 title fights on there, at least gives a bit of insurance as to what else is happening there. What do you think? That's my take on it. Do you feel like that's their strategy there, knowing that, Yan and Sterling and Anderson and Nunes, maybe not the biggest names to headline a card on their own?
Have Adesanya in that as your big name, your big star, and then the other 2 title fights are not the biggest names, and I think that's kind of why they're doing that. They need something a lot bigger at the top, and they're trying to kind of build around that. Like, okay, we have 3 title fights, so that's amazing, right? Like the card's great, a lot of stakes, but names are not big draws. So, Adesanya is kind of saving that there at the top, and then the other 2 title fights, I'd say Sterling and Yan is definitely very intriguing for most people, but Nunes is kind of like a lock every time she fights. It's like, okay, Nunes is gonna win, whatever. But people are really interested in the stylistic matchup of Yan and Sterling, and then you got the big name, big star, and Adesanya at the top. So I like it. I think it's fitting.
And before people give me grief for saying Amanda Nunes isn't a draw, I know she's a draw. It's just this fight is not, I think people looking at it on paper, you've got someone, Megan Anderson, who's got a couple UFC fights, taking on the GOAT. I mean, if Anderson wins this fight, nothing against her, but there would be a huge upset. I mean, I don't think anyone would disagree with that. So I think it has more to do with that. If Nunes was fighting Valentina Shevchenko, then absolutely that could headline a card. I'm not saying that, but just in general, Anderson, Nunes, I don't think that's enough to headline a pay-per-view in 2021. So that's where I'm going off on that as far as it not headlining the card. And I don't have a problem with Adesanya and Blachowicz being the main event. It's a huge fight for both fighters. The other bit of news last week, I just caught this actually yesterday. It's not making as much headway, and I don't think it'll actually happen, but Conor McGregor's nutritionist, so he's not working with Lockhart and Leith anymore by the looks of it, or maybe he is, and the guy, I don't know, didn't double check there, but Conor McGregor's nutritionist saying that he believes that 145 pounds for Conor McGregor is, quote, achievable. Should he drop, Brian, in your opinion? He's fighting this month. I think that's obviously the focus, or next week, I should say. But yeah, I personally, I don't think he should drop. I think he should stay at 155. And if anything, look at maybe going to 170 again. What's your take?
I don't see him drop, and I don't think it'd be a smart idea either. It looks to me like he's put on a lot of muscle since, earlier in his career, especially as of late. And to do that, to take your time to do that, and then all of a sudden decide to drop back down to that biggest weight cut that you're ever gonna face is a lot of, that's difficult. You're not gonna get back down easy. It's gonna be even harder now. So I think that would be a stupid move. I think especially if you're trying to get that Khabib fight and lure him back into a rematch fight, then that's definitely not going to happen. And I just see a lot more potential for bigger fights at 55. Let some guys come up to 55, like Holloway, like you said, and a couple other people that can do that. You still have a lot of big fights at 55. So I don't see Conor doing that. He's also played around at 172, and I think he likes that as well. The guy has all the money in the world. Why deal with a big weight cut when you don't have to?
Yeah, and like I kind of teased there, spoiler alert, that I don't think it's a good idea. As you get older, the metabolism slows down a little bit. It's much easier to do that. You remember the last time Conor fought at 45, just seeing him after the weigh-ins, his face was sunken. It did not look very healthy. And obviously his nutritionist knows better than us. I mean, that's why they're nutritionists, but I just don't think it's worth it. And the other thing, like you mentioned, the division just doesn't have the type of names it used to. I mean, Aldo, Edgar, those are big names. I think Volkanovski, while he's a great champion, not exactly a big name. I think Ortega, decent name, but he's been off for a while. You've got, Holloway's obviously still a draw, but he's got to get back to that position if that's going to happen. So I don't think it's a good move. I don't think Conor McGregor will go down to 45. I think if anything, you'll see him back up at 170 again, maybe a trilogy with Nate Diaz at some point. But Conor's looking at the money here, and there just aren't any money fights for him at 145 right now, from my perspective. So I don't think you'll see Conor dropping anytime soon. Anything else on Conor that you want to? Obviously, we'll preview I'll be previewing the fight or talking about the fight in a couple weeks, but really excited fight with Poirier. The photos that have come out, this guy looks in amazing shape, and it's such an intriguing. We might as well just mention that quickly. The Poirier fight. What are your early thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I'm excited because to me, I feel like Conor kind of lost his swag for a little bit. He wasn't as focused. The money gets to you, the fame gets to you. It's not the same thing. And I think maybe now he's reset his mind and he seems to be very focused on that old Conor again, that just wants to fight, and get in there and show that he's better than these guys. I'm excited for that. I've seen the photos. I've seen some training videos. I think he looks focused. He looks really sharp. So I think this is the Conor we all want to see go in the cage and fight. We don't want to see him come in there half-ass and kind of just try to get another payday, whatever. But Yeah, I think he looks great, and I think this fight's interesting because Poirier's made so many improvements over the years as well. I think he's a way different fighter at 55 than he was at 45. He's definitely filled into his frame. He has the power. He has the, you know, the veteran savvy now. He's found himself as a fighter. He's not as, you know, he's way mentally stronger too, and he's not going to have to deal with that face to face as much with Conor. I feel like leading up to this fight, kind of get a little bit more peace to yourself. You don't have to deal with the press conferences and the face to face talk back and forth. So I think that helps Poirier as well.
What do you think of Conor saying he's going to knock out Poirier in 60 seconds? Do you see that as that's going to happen? I mean, Poirier has one knockout loss at 155, and it was to Michael Johnson. And that was a couple of years ago.
I mean, the thing with Conor, that when I heard him say that, it's like when Conor says things, they typically happen. So it's kind of like, man, this guy's feeling that confident right now. There's something to that. You know, he's definitely put in the work. And I think maybe he's thinking, you know what? I beat this guy the way I beat him. I want to do it even better this time. That's the only thing you could do, is do it better, right? So that's in his mind, and I think that's what he's looking at, why he's saying that. I don't see that happening. I just think Poirier is a different fighter. He's going to be a little smarter early on in the fight, maybe chop Conor's legs down a little bit and try to work from there. So I don't see it within 60 seconds, but I do think it's high potential Conor knocks him out again.
I'm taking Conor as well. I do think Poirier, you know, a lot of factors here. And by the way, I see we have some questions in the chat. We'll get to those in a second here. But in terms of the rematch, I think a lot of things have changed. Number one, it's at 55. So I think, you know, Poirier getting knocked out, I think his chin's held up a little bit better in that weight class, including fighting guys like Gaethje and Hooker that have knockout power, right? Number two, Poirier does get hit a lot. That is one thing to mention. So can he take a Conor McGregor punch at 155? We'll have to see. If not, and the fight goes later on, I mean, Poirier is a guy that's shown he can go 5 rounds and dig deep and beat a Max Holloway or beat a Dan Hooker as well. So I do wonder with that. And the other thing too is when they first fought, Boom, I think Poirier had only been training at American Top Team for a short period of time. He's now one of their mainstays there. He's had a good camp. He's getting to work with a variety of different opponents. So it's a much different fight. I think people are so convinced that it's going to be a repeat of the first fight. I think there's so many things that have changed, including Poirier being more active. And I know people will point out that, oh, Poirier only fought once last year, and same thing with Conor, but you got to look at since 2015. That's what you got to look at. 2015 is when Conor won the lightweight title over Eddie Alvarez. If you look at from then until now, I think Poirier has fought almost 11 times or something. It's like close to 8 to 10 times or something like that. Whereas Conor, I think, has only fought 3 or 4 times, and that's including the Mayweather fight. Now, not to say he's not training, but you know, if Poirier is in the cage more often, that has to be a bit of an advantage. What do you make of those little tidbits heading into this big fight?
Yeah, I think that plays a big factor as well. You know, the experience, the momentum, that stuff could be powerful. And I think for Poirier, that kind of makes him who he is these days. You know, that's why he's improved so much. That's why he's found more and more comfort each time out in there. But he has been through a lot of wars. You know, he has taken a lot of shots, and that could add up as well. And like Conor's coaches say, when you get hit by Conor, it's just different. You know, it's different kind of power. So I think that is what will make the difference. You know, I don't think a lot of these guys don't hit like Conor, and maybe when he hits you in the right spot, and that's just a different kind of story right there. So I see Conor kind of doing the same thing. I just see it a little bit later in the fight.
Very good points there as well. All right, let's get to some questions. We've got MMA fight picks in the chat, which is Aaron Weinbaum, which is the same guy who runs the Ally Quinta Realty account. If you guys aren't following that, one of the best accounts on Twitter. Love that as well. He says, sup, Baldy, go Blues. Of course, he's a big St. Louis Blues fan. Good team this year. You know what, though? I was looking down their depth chart. I mean, they're not as strong as they used to be, St. Louis. They've lost a few pieces over the years, including Patrick Maroon. What do you make of the NHL season? We might as well start there with this division realignment. Like it's you know, sort of sink or swim for the North Division, the Canadian division. There's a lot of good teams in there. What do you think of this upcoming season?
Yeah, there's a lot of good competition. You know, teams that are very well, you know, they know each other very well. It's teams that are kind of close together. The Eastern Conference, I mean, they got to play all the East teams. Canadian play all the Canadian teams. So I think it kind of stinks to not have a little bit of diversity and see them face other teams. You know, Eastern versus Western. You always like to see it kind of get mixed up like that. But maybe it makes for bigger rivalries. You know, they got to play each other more often. That creates a little bit more frustration between certain players, and I think more fights and stuff like that. So maybe it makes for more excitement. So hopefully that's the case.
Yeah, it'll create more rivalries for sure, because I don't know why, but in Canada, like Vancouver fans hate Toronto fans and vice versa, but they only play each other like once, twice a year. So the fact that they're going to see them more often, I think will create some good rivalries there. And conversely, for some of these other teams, you know, the fact they're going to be playing each other more often, I think you'll see those types of rivalries, and I see it as a positive as well. But I'm just glad to have hockey back. I missed it, you know, for a little bit. bit. I know it usually starts around, October, but to have it, start now, I can't wait. January 13th is the start date. Did a couple hockey pools yesterday, so really excited to get back into that. Let's keep it with the questions. The MMA holds. Good to hear from you guys. He says the Islanders with the puke emoji. I'm guessing Mystic Moss is a Rangers fan. I'll have to ask him tonight. I'm actually doing their show tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern time. But I like the Islanders. You know what? Like, I think the coolest thing about the Islanders is that Tavares bolted and they got nothing in return, and then they've been even better. And I think the Leafs have been worse. So I don't know. This is something we've talked about too. I think the Islanders got a strong roster this year, especially with Barzal re-signed, right?
Yeah, that was a big re-signing. I mean, the guy's definitely a standout player. I think at times he's a little stubborn with the puck. He likes to hold on to it for a little bit too long. I don't know what was going on with him. He was in New York, but he wasn't at the practices at first. But that's probably just negotiation stuff. He's trying to get paid the most that he can get, so can't blame him for that. But he's an amazing player and so exciting to watch. So I'm excited that they re-signed him, and I can't wait till it starts. It's a short season, but it's gonna be good. Though.
It's good to have hockey back. I agree. We got Gerald in the chat saying Dustin has expressed his desire to move to welterweight. Thoughts? I've heard this as well, but it's possible. I think if Dustin loses to Conor, he might look at fighting at 170 because really he's not going to get a shot at lightweight anymore. He lost to Khabib to I guess unify the titles, and losing to Conor. I mean, that would be a big setback. And 155 is just getting moving again. You've got Oliveira, you've got Gaethje, you've got all these other opponents. I think sort of the wild card in this is actually Gaethje because Poirier has a win over him. But I could see it as a possibility just because, when you lose another opportunity at a title and you get pushed back further, you got to kind of look elsewhere. And I know 170's got their own mess up there with, some of their contenders, but still, I think Poirier may look at welterweight if he does not come out on top against Conor. What are your thoughts?
I can see that happening. He won't be the biggest welterweight, but he does have a decent cut to 55, and I do think, later on in guys' careers when things aren't happening great, you've already had your chances at the title. Like you said, he lost to Khabib, and if he loses to Conor, it's kind of like, what do you do now? You got to reset. So sometimes guys like to revive their career by moving a weight class. You get a fresh start, you face someone new, and you get 1 or 2 wins, and you get a title shot at that weight class. So I could see it happening if things go wrong with Conor. But you have that Colby fight. Colby kind of pokes at him a little bit. That could be a potential fight at welterweight. You never know what happens, but I'd be excited to see Poirier anywhere.
Okay, now this question I don't know the answer to. Maybe you do. Gerald says thoughts on Cejudo and Daiso. Is that how you say it? DAICO's recent ongoing feud. I have no idea who that is.
Davison Figueiredo. I think he has like a nickname or something.
Davison Figueiredo. Oh, gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think Henry's going to come back. I think a lot of it is talk because here's my theory, Boom, and I want to hear your thoughts on this. So I think Cejudo wants a good payday, and understandably, he's done a great job marketing himself, whether you like the cringe gimmick or not. You look at the views on YouTube, you look at the buy rates. I think they're pretty decent for what he's bringing. But the problem is, I don't think the UFC views him as much of a draw, so they're not going to pay him the money he wants, and that's why I don't think he'll come back. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I agree. I think that he kind of thinks he's a bigger star than he actually is, or his value is higher than the UFC views it. So I think that that's going to kind of put a halt to things. But I think he's still trying to stay relevant and stir the pot and kind of keep things, fresh in case something does come about. Maybe the UFC jumps and they think, something's big. I don't know. I don't really see it happening myself. I mean, possible, but I don't think the UFC is going to meet him where he quite wants. But maybe he comes back. Maybe he kind of, agrees to something, and maybe they compromise and meet in the middle, and maybe something happens, and he comes to fight either Volkanovski's potentially, to get a third title. I could see that being something of interest for him, but you never know. I don't think the UFC views him as he views himself. So.
We got a question from Armav. He says, do you know when the fighters who fight on the January 20th fight card arrive on Fight Island? I heard they leave this Wednesday, I think. I think it's like a week they get. So that would be the 13th, I think, to go for the 20th. Is that what you were, or that's what you're hearing?
Yeah, I believe so, because for me, I was going to fight on the 16th. They had us flying out the 6th to Vegas, and then I believe we would fly out the 8th or the 9th to Abu Dhabi. So it's 6-7 days, about a week out. Yeah, so that makes sense.
And Armav also says, are you fully recovered from COVID? Well, you didn't have any symptoms, right? I think it was.
No, no symptoms, nothing at all. Had my smell, my taste as well as I could. I got a deviated septum, so I can't smell that good anyways, but
Oh, really?
I can yeah, my nose is all jacked up. I'm always like sniffling, but yeah, I could still smell and taste and everything like that. I didn't have any feelings of, fatigue or sickness. I felt great, to be honest. I'm still in phenomenal shape. I was peaking and kind of upset I don't get to put that to use, but hopefully they rebook me soon.
Yeah, we'll be keeping tabs on that. Producer Jordan, if you want to chime in on any other stuff we can talk about here as we're wrapping up the show. If not, if you guys have any questions, by all means, get them in the chat here. Some other news we'll just kind of quickly mention. I don't think I've talked to you about this, but Anthony Pettis going to PFL. I think this is a great move for him. Get the $1 million if you can. I think there's a good ceiling for him, and it sounds like they're going to work with his new management company as well too. So it's kind of like a win-win. And to be clear, and I wasn't surprised by this either, the UFC did want to keep him, Brian. They did offer him a contract, just Pettis wanted to make a little bit more money. And I think for him, I think with certain fighters, like I don't think Pettis was ever going to fight for a title again. So if you know that, you have a decent name being a former UFC champion, go elsewhere and use your brand. I think it's a smart move for Pettis. Your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a really smart move. And, he's kind of an older veteran in the sport right now. And, change is sometimes really good. And especially for him, he could be the face of that company and he could get $1 million twice if he wants to. And that's on top of his fight pay and whatever else on the back end that they have on his deal. So, he's with first round management. I'm sure they got him something special with them and they're still building their brand over at PFL. So I think it's kind of a win-win for both.
This other bit of news we got to mention: Dana White doing an interview with Brett Okamoto, and this quote stands out on Khabib Nurmagomedov. I'm going to press him as hard as I can for this one to come back. I don't really see the need. You've got lightweight already pretty stacked as it is, with guys like Conor and Poirier and Gaethje. I mean, it's a shark tank right now in terms of what you have at 155. It's so rare for fighters to go out on top undefeated. And the way Khabib has, especially with the way he won his last fight. I don't think Khabib comes back for Conor. I know you mentioned that as a possibility, but I think there's too much bad blood there with some of the stuff that Conor said, and I don't think Khabib wants to give him that platform. I think the only fight you do is GSP, and I don't get any indication he's coming back, even though he is training every day. What do you think? Do you think Khabib comes back?
I think we might have lost Brian there.
We might have lost Brian, but it's all good. I'll keep it going. As I said, I don't think Khabib comes back. I don't think. I think again, the only way it happens is if GSP comes back, and I just don't see that as much of an option for him going forward here. So yeah, I think Dana White will try his best, but I don't think it's the worst thing in the world if Khabib doesn't come back. He's a super talented guy. He's got that fight promotion now. I think there's a lot of options for him going forward that don't involve him having to be through a training camp or fight again. And he's not going to welterweight. He's buddies with Usman. I mean, there's no challenges for him other than maybe like a Charles Oliveira fight. But even then, that's not the type of fight I think that's going to bring Khabib out of retirement. Boom, do we got you back? Doesn't look like it. We'll keep trucking on here for a couple more minutes to see if we get Brian coming back. Boom says he's lost me in the chat here. I think we got to try and add him back in. We'll see what we can do. I'll answer some more questions in the chat while we're killing some time. Are you still going to fight Simone, or are they moving on from that fight? Simone is now fighting a newcomer. We will look that up here on the 20th. I actually made the mistake of previewing that fight on my podcast this morning. It's not happening this weekend. Simone is fighting a newcomer. Let me find the guy's name here on the 20th. He's fighting a guy by the name of Gaetano Perello. I think that's how you say it. 15-5-1 record. So that's who Simone is now fighting. So that fight will not happen next. What else do we got in here? Yes, homeless. We see your thing about the title. It's going to get fixed. Just want to mention it on here. Landon not video bombing. No, Landon's at daycare today, so my son will not be on this live stream today, unfortunately. So he's not going to come back on the stream here. He's at daycare. Why push Khabib when there are so many big draws at lightweight right now? I agree. Armav, couldn't agree with you more. I think that makes a lot of sense here. We got Jared in the chat. Doesn't seem appealing for Khabib at all. He's already starting his life after his after fighting life journey. I agree. I don't think you'll see Khabib come back at all. So yeah, I think that's what's going to take place here. We're just waiting a little bit longer for Brian. We'll wait a couple more minutes. If not, I'll give him a proper send off and make sure that we're adding Brian back in now. We're going to see if he comes back in the chat here. We got a little bit more time. No worries. It's all good. Producer Jordan working the magic behind the scenes. By the way, big shout out to Jordan. We got him now. We got him
Was
now.
it me?
We got him back. That's the magic of a good producer there. So Jordan making it happen there as well. So I just asked you about Khabib. Do you think he's going to come back, Boom?
I don't think he's going to. It's kind of weird how Dana acts about trying to draw him back. You know, it's a weird like desperation type of feel. I think it's coming all from Conor. I think Conor is really desperate to get that fight back. I think that's kind of what he wants, and that's his biggest motivation right now. But Khabib is a guy that has enough money where you're not going to draw him back in with a money. With a money lure, it's not going to be something of interest. And I think, yes, 30-0 was a big thing he talked about with his father, but you don't go out on top, like you said. You know, it's very hard to do. It's a very special thing, and I'd rather see that, stay the way it is. You know, the guy's done everything. He's dominated the division. He's defended his title over and over, and he's done it in amazing fashion. So just let the guy be, and let his story just stay where it is right now.
It's very hard to have a career like someone like Ray Bork, for example, using a hockey reference here. Ray Bork played for the Boston Bruins forever. I got traded to Colorado, won a cup with them, said, that's it, I'm done. I'm going out on top, right? Why can't everyone have a Ray Bork story? That's all I'm saying there.
I was watching that not too long ago when he raised the cup and they said, Raymond Bork. It's awesome.
Yeah, it was a great moment there. Just take a couple more questions, guys, and then we're going to wrap things up. Armnav says, is Tony going to move up or is he retiring? Armnav, you got to not write the book off on Tony just yet. He lost to two of the best lightweights in that division in Gaethje and Oliveira. I say you give Tony a bounce back fight at 155 to see where he fits. Don't mean any disrespect by saying this, but I think like an Ally Quinta fight makes a bit of sense. Al's fallen on some tough times in the lightweight division, been off with a bit of a layoff. I think that fight makes sense. Just someone that's a decent name that Tony can be competitive with, but we got to gauge where he is right now. Is Tony really done, or is it a case that he's fighting guys that are just amazing? I mean, we know that's partly true as well with Oliveira, looking even amazing before that fight with Tony, where he dismantled Kevin Lee, right? You don't just go out there and beat Kevin Lee in the striking, but that's what Oliveira did. Same thing with Gaethje, going on to fight Khabib. So I think Tony will get another fight or two at lightweight, and then we'll gauge where he's at. But obviously Father Time not on his side that way. What do you think is next for Tony, Boom?
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, something seems off with him. I know something's going on with his coaches. They definitely weren't the same coaches in his corner the last fight. But you gotta give Charles Oliveira the credit in the world for that kind of performance, especially grappling wise against a high level jiu-jitsu guy in Tony Ferguson. But yeah, he's got a big enough name still where he's going to stick around, and I'm sure the UFC is going to give him a couple more and kind of see where he's at. But he needs a rebound fight for sure.
I'm saying he looked a lot of damage in his last two fights. I agree, but you know who else took a lot of damage and is doing just fine now? Edson Barbosa, right? Khabib and Kevin Lee absolutely dismantled him, and then he dismantled Dan Hooker, and now he's fine at 145. So, and I thought he beat Dan Ige as well. So it just depends. You can't write someone off after a couple fights. If we're seeing a pattern here, if it's like a Junior Dos Santos and you're getting finished in 4 straight fights, that's when we can have that conversation. But Tony's not there yet. I don't think he's got to take a step down. It's like Woodley, same thing. When Woodley was losing, yes, he was getting dominated. If you give Woodley someone that's not in the top 5, we'll see how he performs, and then we can reassess. That's just my take on that. Good time to wrap things up, Boom. Again, sorry to see you're not fighting this weekend. Hopefully you get rebooked soon. Always great seeing you in the cage, and great having you on here, man. I love bringing you on as a co-host. I don't know why ESPN and these other people haven't wised up and brought you on there as well, because you do a phenomenal job with the analysis. Really appreciate you coming on. Anything you want to plug, any social media, any sponsors, anything like that, I'll give you the floor here.
Yeah, thank you again for having me. I really appreciate the platform. Good to get the experience doing this again as well. And if you guys want to follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Brian Boom 135, YouTube channels, we got the Boom Breakdown. You could just search Brian Kelleher on there. And that's about it. Thanks again.
And for us, just another reminder to you guys, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. We're almost at 10,000 subscribers. We're getting there bit by bit. Like I said, this show every Monday, you got the betting show with Dan Tom and Dan Levi. You can check that out every Thursday on this channel. And my best interviews are on here. We got both headliners for next week's card, Neil Magny and Michael Chiasso. We're getting you the best interviews here on this channel. So make sure you subscribe if you're an MMA fan. And if you're a hockey fan, you see I'm wearing the jersey here. Great stuff with Real Kipper. Always getting good guests. We had Patrick Kane. I mean, the list goes on. Steven Stamkos. Really is one of the best channels, and I'm not just saying that because I work for them. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Hope you guys have a great rest of your Monday. Enjoy the fights this weekend. Remember, it's an earlier start time, so definitely make sure you're not having any plans on Saturday. You can watch it with the football. It's going to be awesome. I'm James Lynch. He is Brian Kelleher. Thanks so much for watching, and hope you guys have a great rest of your day.